Late night store clerks, what is the strangest thing you've seen? I work nights at a gas station in a pretty good neighborhood in New Hampshire, so usually it's pretty boring. One night I did have a customer really creep me out. I was just getting ready to close down the store when a little old man came in. He was small and dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. I made the usual small talk of asking him how his day was going. Then as I was handing him his change, he firmly grabbed my wrist, made direct eye contact with me, and said, "Hell is a real place, and the devil has already got his hand on you, girl, be careful."
I get it. Working nights can be out sometimes. One time, I was at a gas station when a customer said something really unsettling. This older guy stared me down and gave me a warning about hell and the devil. It felt out of place and kind of creepy, just like your experience. Those moments stick with you, making the night shift even weirder than it already is.
I've never been a store clerk, but I was lucky enough to witness the following story. 7/11, circa 1996. A guy walks up to the surly clerk, who seemed to work 25 hours a day, and asks, "Do you sell eggs by the 1/2 dozen?" Clerk, "No, you have to buy a dozen." Guy, "I only need 6, clerk. I don't care. You get 12, or you get 0. Without saying another word, the guy walks back to get his dozen eggs, pays, and walks out. Then he throws his 6 unwanted eggs at the store window before driving off.
That's a classic moment. It's interesting how a simple exchange can escalate like that. The clerk definitely wasn't in the mood, and the guy had his own way of making a point. It's kind of funny how both of them were so stubborn. Makes you wonder how many other strange interactions happen in those little convenience stores. A slice of life, I guess.
I work at a deli, and about a half hour from close a woman comes to the counter and just says lamb bone. We had it, so I go to the back freezer. Come back to the counter, and her daughter is there. She tells me to cancel the order. Meanwhile, her mom is right beside her repeating lamb bone over and over again. She had dementia, and I didn't even notice.
That's a tough situation. The woman's daughter had to deal with her mom's confusion while you were just trying to help. It's easy to overlook those signs sometimes. Working in customer service, you run into all sorts of people and situations. Just shows how important it is to be patient and understanding, even when things get a bit weird. You never really know what someone is going through.
11:30 p.m. in AUS here, and on break working till 4 a.m. in a sort of restaurant/fast food store. Last week I saw a woman order 4 burgers, but wanted no ingredients other than lettuce. Not even any bread. I offered if she would like to just buy the lettuce as a topping and just pay $1.25 for it, but she insisted on ordering 4 servings of burger lettuce at full burger price.
That's pretty wild. I guess some people really stick to their preferences, no matter how odd they seem. It must have been a slow night for you to notice something like that. Can't imagine spending that much on just lettuce, though. But I guess it's her money. You've probably seen many strange orders in that job.
I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift in an all-night garage for a few months when I was 18. There was this weird Vietnamese dude who drove a white Honda Prelude and always filled up with 6 pounds and 66 pence of petrol. He wore the same pair of cutoffs every time, with blotches and bruises all over his legs, and used to literally wander in, leaning against the displays, pick up as many yogurts as he could carry, pay with a 50-pound note, and stagger out. One time he came in with these 2, obviously prostitute, women who were draped all over him with the biggest pupils I have ever seen. They stood at the counter while I scanned all their yogurts, and he spoke for the first and only time, staring at me. Said to the women, "She can join us, can't she?" One of the women looked at me and said, "You'll make a lot more money if you come with us, darling." I nervously laughed, took their cash, and they left, grinning in silence.
That sounds like a strange experience. Working those hours can be tough, and running into characters like him makes it memorable, but not in the usual way. The whole scene feels surreal, especially with the way he interacted with you. It's wild how people have their own routines, and this guy clearly had his own style. The offer from the women just adds another layer to the oddness of it all.
Had a guy pull up to the pump, unhooked it wanting post-pay. Our policy said not to authorize it between midnight and 5 a.m., prepay only. I announced this to the dude over the loudspeaker. I'm pretty sure he was wasted. He continued to get more and more belligerent. When he started beating the pumps with a nozzle/hose, I called the cops. Dude starts banging on the door, locked, no way he would get in. Can't, gets frustrated, and finally just whips his deal out and starts wagging it in the general direction of the store. The CCTV is getting all this. I just start laughing my ass off. Then the cops pull up, and 2 deputies put this poor, drunk, deal-wagging man away in the back of a police car. I quit a few months after that.
That sounds like quite the night. Dealing with a drunk guy like that can get wild, especially when they lose it. It's kind of funny how people react when they don't get their way. I guess you got a solid story out of it, despite the chaos. Quitting after that makes sense. Sometimes, you just want to escape the madness. Can't blame you for leaving that scene behind.
A guy came in to buy beer after hours. Told him I couldn't sell. It was against the law. He pulled out a badge, said, "I am the law." I called 911 and a cop shows up, tells me if I can just let it go, I wouldn't have any more problems. I let it go. 2 weeks later, driving home late at night, way over the speed limit, I got pulled over. It was cop number 2. He came up to the car, recognized me, said slow down, and left.
That's a wild story. It's funny how things turn out, though. You run into the same guy again, and he just gives you a pass after that encounter. Makes you think about the unpredictability of life and the people you meet. Sometimes you just have to let things slide, right? Probably a good call in that moment. At least you didn't end up with a ticket that night.
I worked at a 24/7 gas station in a small college town. One night, the club across the street had a fight break out, and about 50 people were pepper sprayed by the police when they responded at about 1:30 a.m. 5 minutes later, cue 50 angry club goers busting into the store, running to the dairy cooler, dousing themselves in milk, and then running back out. I just stood there in utter confusion and then told my boss I didn't want a late shift anymore. Edit. Man, I really missed out on an amusing pun with utter confusion. Huh?
That sounds wild. Just imagine, one moment it's a quiet night, and the next you've got a mob of people pouring milk all over themselves. I can see why you'd want to avoid that scene again. It's kind of funny in retrospect, though. Sometimes life just throws these bizarre moments at you, and you can't help but wonder how you ended up there. I'd probably want to change shifts too after that.
I had a regular customer come in and buy the same exact beer and cigarettes every day. He was always muttering something, but I could never make out what he was saying. I really paid close attention one day, and he was rambling on about horse racing and the different odds for the horses. He was an interesting character. Also had a guy coming high as fuck with his mom, and he bought $60 worth of greeting cards. That guy was pretty cool.
It's funny how some customers become part of the daily routine. That guy with his horse racing odds definitely had his own thing going on. You never know who will walk in next. The mom and her son buying greeting cards is a wild combo. Seems like there's always a mix of characters stopping by, making each day a bit more unpredictable. Just goes to show that life can surprise you in little ways.
Not super late, but at the last minute this dude came into Best Buy when I was working in the mobile store. He was tatted up, shaved head, had a Hispanic GF, and he was a pretty nice guy. It made me laugh a bit. I go to grab a phone out of the cabinet, and a coworker asked how it was going with the neo-Nazi. I was confused. Apparently, he had lots of tells, mostly from his tattoos. I thought my coworker was full of shit until I went back and noticed the small swastika tat on the space between his thumb and first finger. I got a little nervous being non-white, but he was super cool, personable, funny, and had a Hispanic GF for crying out loud. I consider it weird because he was so chill. Best neo-Nazi customer I've ever had.
That's an interesting experience. It shows how appearances can be misleading. This guy seemed friendly and funny, but those tattoos told a different story. It's strange how someone can have such contrasting sides. I guess it highlights the complexity of people. Sometimes the most unexpected interactions can happen. Makes you think about the judgments we jump to based on looks alone. Just goes to show there's often more beneath the surface.
I was working the graveyard shift at a big grocery store doing the self-checkout registers. I was the only person around the store other than the stock crew and maybe 2 or 3 customers. I got a call from the fuel center, and the attendant was freaking out and told me someone was flipping over the Coke machines. WTF, right? And she was calling the police. I assumed the guy would just leave after that, so I held tight and waited for the police. Until this young blonde guy walks in and calmly walked past me. I tailed him for a few aisles, and once he turned the corner on the baby aisle, he took off running and grabbed a big display of Dr. Seuss books and flung it to the ground. He ended up getting arrested at the entrance by a few cops, and I got asked question after question. All in all, a fun night.
That sounds wild. Working a graveyard shift can be pretty quiet, then something like that happens. It's strange how people can act. I mean, who flips over Coke machines? And then this guy just waltzes in and makes a mess of kids' books. It must have felt surreal to watch. At least you had some excitement to talk about afterward. Not every night is that eventful, I guess.
In high school, I worked at a 24 pharmacy, which also had a small selection of beer. At about 2 a.m., this guy walks in 3 sheets to the wind, saunters over to the beer, and grabs 2 12-packs. He comes up to the counter and slams the beer down, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a half-eaten taco and puts it on the counter. I couldn't say anything because I was so perplexed. I just let him walk out with the beer and told my bosses I thought he might have a gun also. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. A couple weeks later, he apparently tried this at the family-owned gas station across the street and got shot.
That's a wild story. Working late shifts can bring out some strange characters. I can imagine standing there, not really knowing what to do while this guy's just being bizarre. A half-eaten taco with beer is an odd combo for sure. It's alarming he got shot later on. Just shows how unpredictable life can be. Sometimes you witness things that make you wonder about people's choices. Glad you were okay.
A fat woman with real stringy hair and no teeth came in my store one night while I worked as a gas station clerk. She walked to the cooler and grabbed a soda, but the whole time she was in the store, she was looking at me all wide-eyed. She came up to the register, still looking dead at me and hardly blinking, put her soda on the counter, and then said, "I birthed you." "Excuse me?" I said, "I birthed you. You came out of my body. I'm pretty sure my mom gave birth to me. You came out of my body. I birthed you in the mountains of Tennessee." I just took her money, and then she left.
That's a wild interaction. I can only imagine how confused you felt. It's strange sometimes who you encounter late at night. The fact she was so intense with her claim is just next level. You'd think people would just grab a drink and go, but then again, the night shifts bring out all types. Just another story to add to the collection of odd customers, I guess.
A large, fully grown, black adult mental patient would come in from time to time and ask for free snacks. I'm not joking, he really was a mental patient. Apparently, he would escape from his assisted living/care building, and I would always have to call the cops to come get him. This would happen multiple times. It got to the point where as soon as he came in, I would just give him an ice cream and just sit him down to keep him occupied. He probably only had the intelligence of a small child.
That sounds like a recurring situation. It's interesting how you ended up establishing that routine with him. Giving ice cream was a simple way to help him stay calm while waiting for the cops. It's sad that he kept escaping, but it shows a bit of kindness on your part. Sometimes, small acts can make a difference in someone's day, even if just for a moment.
I worked at a Walgreens in a not-so-great area, and things would happen on a regular, but none were as weird as this. A man who was a regular came in every day to buy a bag of candy, had no teeth, and seemed really strange, but I was always cool with him since he was a regular. Then one night after getting his candy, he comes back in which he has never done before, and looks at me with the strangest look on his face, and puts this small piece of paper on MYMY counter. No words exchanged, and he leaves for real this time. Then, weirded out, I opened the letter which said, in the creepiest chicken scratch handwriting, "Hey, my name. I was wondering if you would like to see Spider-Man with me tomorrow at the mall at 7 p.m. If so, meet me there at 6. And if I recall, there was some type of smiley face at the end." The dude was about 50-something, and I was around 20. Of course, I didn't go, but I never saw the dude in my store ever again. But I did recently see him at a FY, and booked it when I saw him. Edit. I'm a dude.
That's a wild story. It's strange how people can surprise you, especially in places like that. I mean, getting asked to see Spider-Man by a regular who seemed off is pretty unexpected. I guess not every day you get a note like that. I'd probably have done the same and avoided any awkward encounters after that. But it's good to hear you stayed safe.
I worked nights at a campus library. One fine evening, I was greeted by a bat. It was clearly quite confused and spent a good 20 minutes making laps around the lobby. Every few laps, the cursed creature dive-bombed one of us, flittering over our heads. I called campus PD, expecting them to call animal control. Instead, every bored cop on campus showed up. One of them swatted the poor guy out of the air with his nightstick. The bat bit him when he picked it up.
That night was definitely something else. Working alone and then dealing with a bat could make anyone's shift memorable. The way the cops showed up instead of animal control was pretty wild. But the way things escalated with the officer getting bit is just classic. I guess the bat got the last laugh there. Always expect the unexpected when working late.
Story time. In high school, I worked at a little mom and pop department store. We sold odds and ends at super high prices, and they eventually went out of business when I was a couple years into college. Anyway, one night I was working a closing shift, and that involved shutting down the registers, turning off all the lights, etc. We had just stocked these baby doll toys on the shelf that day, those motion-sensing ones that giggled and cooed when you got close to them. Well, the lights turning off must have triggered them, because after the first chunk goes out, we hear coos. Second chunk goes out, giggles. Third chunk goes out, and we hear, "Islam is the light." Needless to say, we shipped those suckers back to the manufacturer. They didn't know about the propaganda babies, because they only said that phrase randomly, so it must have gotten past whatever testing process they had. Very freaky to hear in a dark store at night.
That's a pretty strange story. Working at a small store could get boring, but that sounds like a wild shift. The idea of those dolls just going off in the dark is unsettling. Hearing something like that unexpectedly would definitely make anyone uneasy, especially late at night. Sending them back seems like the right call. Can't imagine the team was too happy about those dolls. Glad you got out of there safe.
Not so much a store clerk, but I worked the desk at a busy hospital in radiology on a night shift. This made me the only non-doctor who wasn't behind glass on the first floor when people came into the building. We were inner city and also had a psych hospital attached, so things got weird. The strangest one-time occurrence was a woman just jogging through fully naked, not even socks, no hospital bracelet, and about 20 seconds behind her, about 3 security men would run by asking which way. It was like a cartoon because she would run into a room, someone would scream, she'd run out the back door. It went on for a few hours.
That sounds like quite a night shift. I can imagine how chaotic it must have been, especially with a scene like that. It's interesting how the unexpected can happen in a place like a hospital, where you'd think things would be more controlled. It must have been hard to keep a straight face while working through all that. Definitely a memorable experience for sure, though.
Chester Bennington came to my grocery store. You know, the guy from Lincoln Park? Now, he says he wasn't Chester Bennington. He was with his girlfriend or wife. He had tattoos, gauges, short black hair, and was really thin. He was very personable. He would come in late at night to get, I forget what he bought. But I said to him, "You look just like the guy from Lincoln Park." Chester Bennington? Yeah, I get that a lot. He came in twice, it was awesome.
That's a pretty cool story. Meeting someone famous like that can be surprising. It's funny how he played it off, pretending he wasn't Chester. It's nice that he was friendly and approachable too. Just goes to show, celebrities can be down to earth. Even if it was just a grocery run, those little encounters can stick with you. It's a good memory to have, for sure.
Not me, but a buddy of mine worked at a convenience store for a while and told me about a guy that bought out every single bottled soda they had. Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, you name it. Just kept piling them on the counter until he had a couple $100 worth of soda. TLDR, soda addict sweeps 7-Elevens of all sugary nectar of the gods.
That sounds like a pretty wild scene. I can imagine my buddy just standing there, watching this guy turn the store into a mini soda warehouse. Must have been a sight to see someone so dedicated to their fizzy drinks. I wonder what he planned to do with all that soda. It's not every day you see someone go all in like that.
I guess my experiences were the opposite of most on here. Not a great part of town, but some wonderful people. I worked the midnight shift at 7 to 11, right off the highway. I'm female. The first night, there are an awful lot of people trailing in from the Doskasil factory next door. All night, at least one if not more. We have comp, cups for the police, and I was perfectly happy to hand these out for sodas or coffee, 8 ounces. But they always picked up snacks and stuff. Found out later that they staggered their breaks to always have a guy in the store, so I never had any problems. They did this anytime a girl worked the night shift. Faith in humanity equals restored.
That's kind of cool how those guys had your back. Working late shifts can be sketchy, but it sounds like they made sure you felt safe. Just a little thing, but it really shows that there are decent people out there looking out for one another. Makes you appreciate those small acts of kindness, especially in not-so-great places. Definitely a reminder that not everything is as bad as it seems.
I used to do overnights at a 7 to 11 many years ago. There's a box in the cooler with loose beer that isn't on inventory. Basically, whenever some punk steals a single Bud Light, they have to write off the rest of the six-pack. Not exactly strange, but we got drunk a lot in the middle of the night. Nothing better than free beer and recently expired donuts.
Sounds like you had a pretty chill gig. Late nights at a 7 to 11 with some free beer and old donuts doesn't sound too bad. I guess that's where a lot of questionable decisions happen. Just hanging out, enjoying those small perks, made the nights a bit more bearable. It's funny how those random moments can turn into decent memories.
I worked at a 7 to 11 in a rough neighborhood for years. Most of the customers were regulars, including these 3 heroin addicts who came in one night. They were clearly high, so my coworker says, "Watch this." He proceeds to change the iPod to Michael Jackson's greatest hits. The heroin addicts immediately begin ballroom dancing around the 7 to 11. I'm talking foxtrot, waltz, jive, quick-step, samba. This went on for all 12 songs on that playlist. During this time, customers would approach the store, see 3 of them dancing up a storm, and immediately turn and walk away. That might not be the craziest thing that ever happened to me, but it was one of the most entertaining.
That sounds wild. It's interesting how music can change the vibe completely. Those guys probably felt a rush of joy while dancing. I can imagine the confused looks from new customers. It's a strange mix of chaos and fun in such a place. Moments like that stick with you, showing how unexpected life can be. Definitely something to look back on and laugh about. Just another night at work, right?
This happened last year. Our produce guy reported some strange sounds coming from the roof, as if there was an animal up there. We called in the cops, and our stock crew supervisor led a couple officers up there to investigate. A few minutes later, I saw the officers escorting a ragged couple away in handcuffs. They looked like meth heads that just came from Mayhem Festival. Apparently, they had a shovel and wanted to dig down through the roof and into our pharmacy without anyone noticing. I'm used to keeping an eye out for shoplifters, but I never thought to suspect noises from the damn roof.
That's a wild story. Sounds like something straight out of a movie. You'd get used to the usual stuff in retail, but a couple trying to break in from the roof? That's next level. I guess it goes to show you can't really predict what might happen in a day. Always something new to keep on your toes, huh? Just when you think you've seen it all.
Not a late-night worker, but we have this one old lady that stops by our store just before we close at least once a month to spout some insane, nonsensical poetry at us. Usually stuff about security cameras shooting lasers into your brain when you aren't looking. She asks us if we understand. We smile and nod. She giggles and shuffles off. Fun stuff.
That's pretty wild. Sounds like she brings some unexpected entertainment to your shifts. People like that can really change the vibe of a place, even if it's just for a few minutes. I guess it makes those long hours a bit more interesting. It's funny how some folks see the world in completely different ways. Just nodding along must be part of the routine by now.
This was just night, not overnight, but had a lady come in, drunk, trying to buy beer. Clerk wouldn't let her. I was stocking, so not me, but yeah. Because drunk. She told him off, walked out to her car. Yeah. And purposely ran over pump 2. The clerk freaked and ran outside after her. The customer at the counter calmly wrote down her plate number. "You the real hero, random Asian dude." This was all on camera and hilarious later. She went to jail for her 5th DUI.
Crazy night, right? A drunk lady trying to buy beer and flipping out when she got rejected. Running over the pump was definitely a wild move. The clerk running after her just shows how unexpected things can get. That random guy writing down her plate was smart. I guess it's one of those nights you'll remember where everything just spiraled out of control. Sounds like a scene from a movie.
I felt bad for the guy, but he would show up at about 2 a.m. He was severely obese and would buy and eat Twinkies in THR store for about half an hour. He was under strict diet control by his wife, so he would sneak out to eat. He'd eat 10 to 15 Twinkies with some milk them leave. I sort of felt bad for not trying to give him encouragement to not eat, but at that point I don't think he could be reasoned with.
It's tough to see someone struggle like that, especially when they're clearly trying to hide it. Sneaking out at night just to indulge in something like Twinkies shows a lot about his situation. You want to help, but it feels like nothing would really get through. Sometimes people are just in a place where they can't hear advice, and that's hard to accept. It's a complicated situation for sure.
Work in a pharmacy. We had a guy come in and pick up a prescription, and he's standing there with a tub of ice cream and a spoon. I asked if he bought that. He just says, yeah, and walks off. 20 minutes later, I help a customer find something in the store, and I see an empty shopping cart with a half-empty tub of melted ice cream. I reported it to a manager, and they said, "I didn't see it, so we can't do anything." But I know his name, and I know for a fact he's going to be back in 30 days for a refill. So that's my story.
That's a pretty interesting encounter. It's weird how some people just act like nothing's going on. You'd think he would at least clean up after himself. Now you have to wait a month to see if he does the same thing again. It's a mix of funny and frustrating. At least you have a story to tell when he comes back.
After getting off work late one night, I walked into our local Sheetz, just in time for the bar rush. There was an obviously drunk, middle-aged woman attempting to drink coffee creamer out of the dispenser. Once she got her fill, she moved over to the sweetener dispenser, put her head under it, and started to fill up there too, till an employee escorted her out of their store.
That sounds like a classic late-night scene. It's funny how people can lose track of things when they've had a bit too much to drink. The dedication to getting her coffee fix, even in that state, is kind of impressive, but also a bit sad. I guess the Sheetz experience can sometimes bring out the wild side in people after a long night. Just another night in the life, I guess.
I never understood this mentality. A buddy of mine worked at a Burger King and had this woman who would come and order a burger plus XYZ toppings. When he informed her that what she wanted was a Whopper and that ordering one would save her about $2.50, she flipped her shit and insisted on paying more. So he went back and gave her a Whopper anyways.
Seems like some people just like to make things complicated. Your friend was just trying to help her save some cash, but it's wild how stubborn folks can be. Maybe she had a specific way she wanted it, or just enjoyed the thrill of being difficult. Either way, at least your friend did the right thing in the end. Can't argue with a free Whopper, I guess.
I used to work in food service, and we would have people complain all the time that the big burger, which had 2 patties, we sold didn't taste as good as the little burger with 2 patties put on it. I would tell them that with the extra charge, it was about 50 cents more to order a little burger with an extra patty than just a big burger, but it's just not the same. They were the same meat. Exact same. We just put 2 on the big burger and 1 on the little burger.
That's interesting how people perceive things differently. It's funny how small details, like the size of the burger or the way it's presented, can change someone's experience. They didn't realize they were actually getting the same thing, just packaged differently. It's a good reminder that sometimes our preferences are more about perception than reality.
I also had an elderly woman come in her bathrobe, nothing else, asking if she could eat the flowers outside. I told her that it probably wasn't a good idea. They might make her sick. There also weren't any flowers. I then offered to get her a sandwich. There is a little grill and restaurant area in the store. So she took the sandwich and sat at one of the tables watching the TV. About an hour, maybe less, one of the workers from a nursing home down the road, maybe 1/2 a mile, came in asking if I'd seen a woman matching his description. I just smiled and pointed to where this nice lady was sipping on a Coke watching cartoons. As that turned out, she was somewhat notorious for eating the flowers at the nursing home. So much so that they had replaced the flowers to be sure that all of them were edible, just in case. She apparently had gone outside to eat flowers and then just gotten confused and wandered to our store, which was very dangerous for her, but hopefully everything worked out for her.
This story reminds me of an old guy I met at a cafe. He came in looking for his lost dog, but the dog was fine, just at home on the couch. He ended up chatting with us and telling wild stories about his younger days. It was a little sad, but mostly funny seeing him so invested. Sometimes, people just need a good chat and a sandwich. It's good to be kind to strangers.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.